Yeah, we used to be the greenest building in the world until this guy, Mark Zuckerberg, you might have heard of him. They're building a little bit bigger one. Anyway, so I think my slides are coming up now. There we go. Excellent, excellent. So I was asked to give an overview about kind of a global context, looking at how does California fit into the global stage of this question about food, energy, and water, and how those all collide together in this moment in human history. And I want to start off with that kind of idea of human history, because this moment that we're alive is entirely unique. Nothing else has ever been like it. We've been on this planet, us and our ancestors have walked this planet for almost 6 million years. That's 300,000 generations of Homo sapiens and our ancestors. All of those, except the last 2 of those generations, had an entirely different world. It was a world that was infinite, where there were always more abundant resources. There was more land, more water, more energy, more and more and more. And we got very good at exploiting that fact. And we spread out, we got bigger, and we were pretty wasteful, but we were able to get more resources. But in the last 2 generations of those 300,000, everything flipped around. The Earth went from being infinite to small. We went from being small to huge. And all of that happened in the blink of an eye for 2 basic reasons. One, well, there are a hell of a lot more of us today. For almost all of human history, there's a few 100 million people. We got to the first billion, well, that's not that many. And we got to the first billion in the late 18th century. We got to 2 billion around World War II, and now we're over at 7, about 7.4 today. So there are a lot more people. Okay, but our footprint per person also increased dramatically because of our use of technology, resources, and energy. This is a picture of what the Earth looks like at night from outer space, showing part of our energy use. There are no lines or boundaries on the map, but you can make out India and Japan, and there's South Korea. Right above it is not North Korea. Well, you see that light on? That's Kim's house. Okay. So, there are a lot more of us, and we're used to never make fun of a guy with a nuclear bomb, but I do it anyway, just for you. So anyway, we got this a lot more people doing a lot more stuff, and this is a very sudden phenomena if you look at human history. In the last 50 years or so, we doubled our population. Our economy grew 7-fold, adjusted for inflation. We used 3 times more food, 3 times more water, and 4 times more fossil-based energy. And if you think about it, we just did more in the last 50 years than not only any other period in history, we did more in the last 50 years than the entire sum of human history and evolution combined. So whether we like it or not, food, energy, and water have created an inflection point in our civilization right now. So that's really, really crucial point to understand first. On the whole, things are getting better. People who work in the environment, we tend to be really depressing, and we don't usually get invited to parties. So thank you. I'm going to be coming back, but that's okay. But on the whole, things have gotten better. We're living longer lives. Most of us have more food security, and a lot of us are more literate. More people live in democracies than any other time in history. Far from perfect, but we're doing a little better. But we're doing that largely at the expense of our planet, and unfortunately, future generations too. So we're degrading the planet in many, many serious ways. And a lot of them are connected, again, to this kind of weird trio of food, water, and energy. So let's take a look around the world to see how they're having an impact. For example, food is degrading land all over the world. This is a picture taken of the Amazon rainforest in the state of Pará in Brazil. And it's being burned down and turned into cattle pasture. We're going to grow some cows. Trading a rainforest for some cattle. That's kind of crazy. But if you step back and look at a similar region with a satellite, you can see this beautiful, rich rainforest, that kind of green carpet. And you might notice a thin little line through it. That's a dirt road that was cleared in 1975. Let's go back to the same place with the same camera in 2003. That looks like Iowa. In fact, almost all of that is soybeans, most of that being shipped to China, most of that being fed to pigs. And that pig will turn into pork, and the pork is going to the now wealthy middle-class Chinese population because they're eating more meat. So diets in one part of the world are clearing forest halfway across the planet today. If we look at the entire planet, this is what I used to do for a living, is use satellites to track every farm in the world. This is a map of every farm in the world. The green ones are where we grow crops. The brown ones are where we grow cattle, basically. If the green areas, if you put them all together, that's an area about the size of South America is growing crops. The brown and tan areas are all the pastures in the world. That's about the size of Africa if we're all in one place. Agriculture is by far the largest use of land. About 35 to 40% of all the land on Earth is doing one thing, growing food. 75% of that, by the way, is growing just meat. So that's pretty, diets matter. Put it in perspective, all the world's cities and suburbs and concrete all put together is 0.6% of all the land. But it sucks when we drive through it. You know? So, but for every acre of city, there's about 60 acres of agriculture in the world. So that's a huge thing. Another, of course, is water here in California, but everywhere in the world. We use enormous amounts of water on the planet. And this is showing a picture going into Phoenix, looking out the airplane window, seeing iceberg lettuce grown in the desert. So we do stuff like that. We do that here in California, and so do people in Saudi Arabia, places even drier than there. This is showing some of the most arid regions on Earth, showing how they're mining ancient groundwater from over 10,000 years ago, the last time it ever rained here, mining it to grow wheat in the deserts of Saudi Arabia. Best estimate is they'll be able to do this for about 15 more years, and then it's over for at least a few tens of thousands of years again. We also see this in the former Soviet Union, where even diverting the rivers that fed the Aral Sea to grow cotton in the deserts of Kazakhstan can cause this kind of collapse to water resources. For perspective, that inland sea used to be 300 miles across, and it collapsed in a decade. Almost all of this water, we're using enormous amounts of water, about 50% of the available water flowing across the Earth's surface is being used. 70% of that for one thing, growing food. In California, it's 80%. So 80% of the water we use in the state is used for irrigation. So this is extraordinary. We're transforming land, we're transforming water, we're even transforming the quality of water. And again, a link between water and food. We're seeing tremendous degradation of water quality, pollution of water from having too much fertilizers and manure and other things washing into the rivers and lakes and even the oceans of our world, transforming it from local areas all the way to even coastal oceans. There's now a large dead zone off the coast of the Mississippi Delta in the Gulf of Mexico, caused mainly because a massive amount of fertilizers rushing off into the ocean, producing these huge algae blooms that later decompose all the oxygen as they decompose. So we're using an amazing amount of water, changing it around the world, most of it connected to food. We're also, of course, changing so much more. It's not just land and water, we're also changing the very atmosphere of our planet and our oceans. It's kind of astonishing. People look at this and say, how could we change the sky? Look up, and it seems infinite. But the atmosphere is actually a remarkably thin layer. The business end of the atmosphere, the lower part with all the weather and all the water and all the oxygen, is called the troposphere. That area is only about 10 kilometers thick, about 6.5 miles. San Francisco is 7 miles across. So from here to Ocean Beach is like the entire atmosphere. One Uber ride away. You're in outer space, in more ways than one. And so we are changing this atmosphere, and we've had a 50% increase in CO2 levels, most of that from energy, but also increasingly from agriculture and deforestation. These are all linked, and we're seeing the evidence of this all throughout the world as climates are changing, melting glaciers, changing ecosystems, changing the very weather and climate patterns of our world. So this is really a desperate time. We're pushing the planet to massive limits, which we've never seen before. 40% of the land, 50% of the water, change the atmosphere, and change the geologic cycling of things like nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, and beyond. This is all back down to these three same things, the three legs the stool of civilization sits on: food, water, energy, and they're all interconnected. You can't think about them separately. So this is a time we have to reboot the world. We have to reinvent. You think like writing an app is a good opportunity for the economy? How about reinventing the food system? Reinventing how we get water, reinventing our entire energy system, because that's what we need to do now. We must do that. And we need different approaches to all three. What's really exciting is we have the opportunity to have massive breakthrough, revolutionary solutions that are right at our fingertips. And I'm convinced that California is going to play a central role in this. We have food, energy, and water happening here already, but also the culture of reinvention and innovation better than anybody. So I want to leave you on a kind of hopeful note. This revolution we need is a revolution that will start here and transform the world. We will change food, energy, and water, and much of it's already underway. In fact, there's a lot of good news. For every bit of bad environmental news you hear, there's 2 good stories. Just the media won't tell you about them. But let me tell you a couple. One is Israel can produce 10 times more food for the same amount of water as California. How do they do it? Tubes. That's it. Drip irrigation. We can do that. If we added a little more tech, we could do it even better. Brazil has cut its deforestation rate by 70% in the last 5 years. The equivalent of taking every car in America off the road forever. Elon Musk is helping out, but Brazil's doing a lot. This is cool. So climate change is being led by Brazil and then the United States. Speaking of the US, our energy use peaked in the late 90s and has been going down every year ever since. We have beat our Kyoto Protocol obligations if we had ever bothered to sign them, which, thank you, George Bush, but we actually beat them because we just got, and it had nothing to do with government. There was no tax on carbon. It was innovation and efficiency, did it all. And this year, we may have had a peak in Chinese emissions, and I think they're going to start going down too. So there's a lot of good news out there. How do we get on and amplify that good news, this revolution to a better world? The problems are big, but the solutions are bigger, and now we just have to get to work. So thanks.